When the billionaire stormed into his son's room, he expected disobedience. What he found instead was a trembling Maid song, soft as prayer, pulling life back into the boy's frail chest. Nothing would ever be the same. The glass towers of the city shimmered under the morning sun, and high above the skyline sat an office where deals worth millions were signed with the flick of a pen. Inside that corner office was Alexander Grant, a man whose name carried the weight of power. His tailored suit cost more than most people's monthly salary. His voice in the boardroom was sharp, decisive, final. When Alexander spoke, entire markets shifted. But when the meetings ended and the city lights dimmed, he returned to a house that was far quieter than any boardroom, a mansion with chandeliers that sparkled like frozen stars, with floors polished to perfection, with walls adorned by priceless art. And yet, the silence in those walls was heavy, suffocating. At the heart of that silence was a boy's bedroom. Ethan, Alexander's 7-year-old son, lay surrounded by soft toys and medical equipment. His laughter had grown scarce, replaced with a thin voice and tired eyes. Doctors visited often, leaving papers, instructions, and pills. But love, warmth, and music were things no prescription could order. Alexander tried. He sat at Ethan's bedside some nights, tie loosened, laptop still in hand. But when Ethan's breathing grew shallow, Alexander's words always fell short. Numbers and mergers couldn't comfort a child's illness. And so, though he provided everything money could buy, he lived with the gnawing knowledge that he was failing at the one role he could never delegate: father. On the other side of the mansion's vast halls lived Naomi Brooks, the maid. To the outside world, she was invisible, just another worker who dusted shelves and polished glass until it gleamed. But to Ethan, she was the one person who never rushed him. She had a way of folding sheets like she was tucking in care itself, of moving quietly so as not to disturb. Naomi had learned early to live humbly. She was a woman of deep brown skin and deeper patience, shaped by both struggle and resilience. Her voice was her secret, something she carried close to her chest. When she was a girl, she dreamed of singing on stages, but dreams didn't put food on the table. Life demanded work, not songs, and so she worked. Yet sometimes, when the house was still, Naomi would hum to herself as she polished banisters or wiped down windows. Soft melodies her grandmother had sung in church, words carried down generations. She thought no one ever heard, except Ethan did. One morning, as she quietly picked up his scattered toys, Ethan whispered, "Can you sing that again?" She froze, startled. "Sing?" He nodded weakly, eyes hopeful. Naomi hesitated. What if the CEO heard? What if she crossed a line? But then she saw the boy's pale face, the weariness in his small chest rising and falling. Something in her heart overruled her fear. She began to hum, then let the tune grow. Her voice filled the room, rich and tender, the kind of sound that wrapped around sorrow and turned it softer. Ethan's eyes drifted shut, not from exhaustion but from peace. His breathing steadied, lips curving into the faintest smile. Naomi swallowed back tears as she finished, quietly gathering the toys as if nothing had happened. Across the mansion, Alexander stared out the window of his study, glass of scotch in hand. He could swear faintly he'd heard something unusual, notes of a song echoing through the halls. He dismissed it. Music had no place here anymore, not since her. Not since his wife's voice, once the melody of his world, had been silenced by illness. Instead, he told himself it was just the wind, or perhaps a TV somewhere in the servants' quarters. He shook it off, pouring himself back into work. But something had unsettled him, a ripple in waters he had long kept still. The days rolled forward. In the mornings, Naomi worked quietly, blending into the rhythm of the mansion. In the evenings, Alexander buried himself in work, every deal and merger a distraction from his own home's emptiness. Yet in the boys' room, another story was unfolding. Ethan began asking for Naomi more often. "Stay," he'd plead, "just until I fall asleep." Naomi, cautious, would sit at his bedside, and though she tried not to, she would sometimes hum again, letting the melody linger just long enough to soothe him. She thought no one else would ever know, but the walls of silence in Alexander's mansion were not as thick as she believed. If you were Naomi, standing in a mansion where one wrong step could cost your job, would you have risked singing to the boy or stayed silent? Comment your gut reaction below. The storm outside rattled against the tall windows of the mansion that evening. The kind of rain that made the world feel smaller, as though all roads ended here, in this house of wealth and silence. Ethan had grown restless. His breathing, always delicate, came in uneven gasps. Naomi hovered by his bed, trying to calm him, her hands folding blankets, her voice soft. "Do you want me to call your father?" she asked gently. The boy shook his head. "No, he'll just look worried and leave again." Her heart ached at the honesty in his little voice. She hesitated, then asked, "What do you need, sweetheart?" Ethan looked at her with pleading eyes. "Sing, please." Naomi's chest tightened. She glanced toward the door, nerves prickling. She shouldn't. She'd been careful, always careful, because boundaries in this mansion were sharp as glass. But Ethan's tiny hand tugged at her sleeve, his face pale and damp with sweat. And so, trembling but resolute, she began. Her voice rose slowly, like the first light of dawn, a hymn her grandmother once sang in a church that smelled of candles and old wood, low at first, then fuller, filling the air with warmth. Each note seemed to press back against the storm outside, wrapping the boy in something deeper than medicine. Hope. Ethan's breath steadied. His eyelids fluttered shut. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, the kind of smile Naomi suspected his father hadn't seen in far too long. Naomi's own throat thickened. She wasn't supposed to feel this much. She wasn't supposed to care this deeply. But as she sang, she poured into the room every bit of love she wished someone had given her when she was small and afraid. She thought they were alone. Alexander had finished a late call, frustration coiled tight in his jaw. Investors complained, deadlines loomed, and yet his thoughts kept drifting to his son. Something in him ached, a gnawing worry he could never shake. Tonight, it pushed him down the hall toward Ethan's room. The door was ajar. He stopped. Inside, Naomi sat by Ethan's bed, her hand brushing lightly against the boy's curls, her voice flowing in gentle waves. The song was unlike anything Alexander had heard in years, rich, tender, raw, too real for this cold house. His first instinct was anger. What is she doing? Who gave her the right? His chest burned with the instinct to storm in, to assert control. But then he saw Ethan's face. His boy, who so often winced in pain, lay still and peaceful, breathing easily for the first time in weeks. A faint laugh, more like a sigh, escaped Ethan's lips in his sleep. Alexander's throat closed. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen that expression. The song ended. Naomi lingered, watching the boy with eyes brimming with tenderness, and then she turned, straight into Alexander's gaze. Her breath caught. "Sir." The word trembled. She stood too quickly, hands knotting at her apron. I'm sorry, Mr. Grant. I didn't mean—" "What?" His voice cut, low and sharp. "Do you think you're doing—" Naomi's heart pounded so loud she was certain he could hear it. She lowered her head. "He couldn't sleep. He asked me to sing. I shouldn't have, but he was frightened. I only wanted—" "Wanted what?" Alexander stepped inside, his tall frame filling the doorway. "To step into roles that are not yours?" Naomi's lips parted, but the words stuck. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, still asleep, peaceful. "I wanted him to feel safe." Her honesty hung heavy in the room. Alexander's jaw clenched. Safe. That word pierced deeper than he wanted it to. He turned toward his son, watching the small chest rise and fall in gentle rhythm. The boy hadn't slept like this in weeks, and still, his pride snapped like armor. "Your job is to clean, not this." Naomi swallowed. "Yes, sir." She bowed her head and began to back away, but Ethan stirred, murmuring in his sleep. "Don't go—" "Sing again." The billionaire froze. Naomi froze too, hand hovering in the air. Alexander's throat tightened, his mask faltering. His son wanted her voice, not his presence. And wasn't that proof enough of his failure? Naomi, trembling, whispered, "Please don't punish me." "I'll stop." Alexander looked at her for a long moment. Her posture screamed fear, but her eyes held something else. Fierce love. For his son. He should have dismissed her. He should have ordered her out. But the image of Ethan's smile, faint, fragile, but real, burned in his mind. Finally he turned away, voice strained. "We'll talk about this in the morning." And with that, he left, shutting the door a little too hard behind him. In his study, Alexander poured himself another drink, but his hand shook slightly as the liquid filled the glass. He sat down, staring at the city lights beyond the windows, but all he could hear was her song. It unsettled him, angered him, moved him. It reminded him of nights when his late wife used to hum lullabies to Ethan, her voice carrying love that no fortune could buy. It reminded him of everything he'd lost, and everything he didn't know how to give back. Across the hall, Naomi sat quietly at the boy's side, tears drying on her cheeks. She had risked too much. Tomorrow, she thought, she'd be dismissed, and yet, if she had to choose again, she would have still sung, because some silences were too heavy to leave unbroken. If you were Alexander standing in the doorway hearing that song, would you have stopped her, or let her continue? Comment what you would have done in his shoes. Morning broke in muted shades of grey. The storm had passed, but the air around the Grant mansion felt heavy with something unspoken. Naomi rose early, as always, her apron tied tight, her steps careful. She scrubbed the marble floors with more force than usual, as though polishing away her own anxiety. Every creak in the house made her flinch, expecting his voice, his judgment. "He'll fire me today." The thought looped through her mind with every sweep of the mop. "And maybe I deserve it." I crossed a line. I let my heart outrun my head. But then she remembered Ethan's smile, the way his face softened into peace beneath her song. That memory was worth every risk. Alexander, meanwhile, sat at the head of a long oak table, a plate of untouched breakfast in front of him. His phone buzzed with messages from partners in London, Tokyo, New York. He ignored them all. He should have been relieved. Ethan had slept soundly for the first time in weeks. Instead, a storm brewed inside him. Her song, her voice, his son's smile, and his own humiliation. You couldn't even give your boy comfort. A maid did what you couldn't. He pushed the plate away and rose, anger the only armor he knew how to wear. He found her later in the kitchen stacking dishes. The clink of porcelain echoed sharp against the silence. "Naomi." She stiffened at the sound of her name in his deep voice. Turning slowly, she wiped her hands on her apron. "Yes, Mr. Grant?" He stepped closer, towering. His tone was clipped, businesslike. "What happened last night will not happen again." Her eyes darted down. "I understand. You're here to work, not indulge personal whims." His hand sliced the air, dismissive. "Ethan is vulnerable. He doesn't need false hope." Her jaw tightened, but she kept her voice even. "I wasn't giving him false hope, sir. I was giving him comfort." His eyes narrowed. "Comfort doesn't cure disease." Naomi's hands balled into fists at her sides. She wanted to shout that love mattered, that his boy needed more than machines and medicine. But she bit her tongue. He was her employer. He could destroy her life with a single word. Instead, she whispered, "Sometimes comfort is what keeps you alive long enough to heal." The word struck him harder than he expected. He felt the sting but masked it with coldness. "Enough. Do your job. And keep your voice to yourself." She bowed her head, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Yes, Mr. Grant." That night, the house felt colder. Naomi avoided Ethan's room, terrified of breaking her promise. She listened as he coughed through the walls, clutching her apron to her chest. In his bedroom, Ethan tugged weakly at his blanket. "Daddy." Alexander looked up from his laptop. "Yes, son." "Can Naomi sing again?" The words cut like glass. Alexander's chest tightened. No, she won't. You need rest. But I do rest when she sings. His boy's small voice broke into sobs. Please, just let her sing. Alexander froze, pain twisting inside him. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to give his boy what he asked for. But pride chained his tongue. It's not appropriate, Ethan. Go to sleep. The boy turned away, tears streaking his cheeks. Alexander reached to touch his shoulder, but Ethan shrank from him. The rejection burned. In her small quarters at the back of the mansion, Naomi sat on her bed, staring at her hands. They ached from scrubbing, but what ached more was her heart. She thought of the way Ethan's eyes lit up when she sang. She thought of the loneliness in Alexander's face, the way he wore his power like a cage. She whispered into the empty room, "I only wanted to help." But silence answered. The next few days stretched long. Naomi did her work without song, her presence quiet as a shadow. Ethan grew restless, his coughs returning, his moods darkening. He asked for her constantly, but Naomi, terrified of losing her position, shook her head and kept her lips sealed. Alexander watched this with growing unease. He noticed Ethan's decline, the way shadows deepened beneath his son's eyes. He noticed, too, how Naomi avoided him, her shoulders rigid whenever he entered a room. And worst of all, he noticed that he had silenced the only thing that had brought his boy joy. One evening, as Alexander passed the grand staircase, he heard it again, faint, almost accidental. Naomi polishing silver, humming under her breath. He stopped dead. The melody was softer this time, hesitant, like a secret escaping against her will. And though she cut it off as soon as she realized, those few notes stirred something raw in him. Grief, longing, anger. Why her voice? Why not mine? Why did my son turn to her instead of me? He clenched his fists. He wanted to demand answers, to lash out. Instead, he turned away, the question echoing in his mind as he stalked back into his study. Naomi, meanwhile, sank into a chair, head in her hands. She had tried to resist, tried to obey, but her heart betrayed her. Her song wasn't just sound, it was a piece of her soul. To silence it felt like silencing herself. And somewhere in the mansion she knew, Alexander Grant was battling a storm as fierce as her own. At this point, who do you feel is right? Alexander, who fears boundaries being crossed, or Naomi, who believes love matters more than rules? Comment your thoughts below. The doctor's voice carried through the long hallway, low but firm. Alexander stood with his arms crossed, his jaw set, as though bracing for a hostile takeover. Naomi lingered behind, clutching a stack of folded linens, straining to hear. "Mr. Grant," the doctor said, flipping through Ethan's chart, "your son's condition is stable, but emotionally he's declining. His body can only do so much if his spirit isn't strong." Alexander frowned. "What are you suggesting? More specialists? A change in medication?" The doctor shook his head. "I'm suggesting something simpler: stability, calm, emotional support. Whoever gives him comfort, let that person stay near. Children need more than treatment, Mr. Grant. They need love." Alexander's lips pressed thin. He didn't like hearing solutions he couldn't buy. Naomi's breath caught. The doctor hadn't said her name, but she knew. She saw Alexander's shoulders tense, knew his pride was fighting the truth. After the doctor left, silence stretched thick between them. Alexander turned, his gaze locking on Naomi. For a moment she thought he'd send her away. Instead he muttered, "The boy wants you near, so you'll stay. For now." Her eyes widened. "Stay? By his side?" "Yes, but understand, this doesn't change anything. You do your work. Nothing more." Naomi lowered her head, but her heart beat hard against her ribs. "Yes, sir." That night, Ethan lay pale against his pillows, his tiny hand clinging to Naomi's. Alexander sat on the other side of the bed, stiff and out of place. Ethan smiled faintly. "Both of you here. Feels nice." Alexander glanced at Naomi, his eyes wary. She smoothed the boy's blanket, whispering, "You just rest now, sweetheart." For hours they remained there, an unlikely trio. Alexander tried to work from his laptop but kept glancing at the way Naomi's touch eased his son, how Ethan relaxed more in her presence than with any machine. It unsettled him. It humbled him. It made him wonder if perhaps he wasn't enough. The following days bound them even closer. In the mornings, Naomi helped Ethan with small stretches, coaxing giggles out of him with silly faces. Alexander, passing by, found himself pausing at the door, drawn in despite himself. At mealtimes, Naomi gently urged Ethan to eat, pretending the spoon was an airplane. Ethan laughed, actually laughed, and Alexander froze in the doorway, realizing he hadn't heard that sound in months. And at night, when Ethan's body grew weak, Naomi would hum. Never fully sing, too afraid, but enough to soothe him. Alexander would sit rigid, pretending to read. But secretly he listened. Every note cracked something in him. One evening, as Ethan drifted off, Alexander finally spoke. His voice was low, almost reluctant. "Where did you learn that?" Naomi looked up, startled. "Learn what, sir?" That voice. His eyes flicked to hers, then away. "It doesn't sound ordinary." Her cheeks warmed. She lowered her gaze. "My grandmother. She used to sing in church. She taught me when I was a girl." Alexander nodded stiffly, as though admitting that answer meant something. "You shouldn't waste it scrubbing floors." Her eyes widened. "It's not wasted if it helps him." For a moment silence stretched. Something unspoken hung between them, an acknowledgement, fragile but real. Then Alexander cleared his throat, retreating into coldness. "Don't get the wrong idea. This is temporary." Naomi's lips curved into a small, sad smile. Of course. But in her heart, she knew something had shifted. Days blurred into a rhythm. The mansion, once a place of echoes, began to breathe with small signs of life. Ethan's giggles, Naomi's soft melodies, even Alexander's footsteps pausing instead of rushing past. Still, tension lingered. One afternoon, Naomi entered the library to find Alexander there, his jacket discarded, his tie loosened. He looked different, less like a CEO, more like a man carrying too much. She hesitated at the door. "Sir, Ethan's asking for you." He looked up, tired eyes meeting hers. "He always asks for you first." Naomi's heart clenched. She stepped closer, her voice soft. "He loves you. He just needs gentleness too." Alexander's jaw tightened, but his gaze didn't leave hers. For the first time, he didn't look like the man on magazine covers, powerful and untouchable. He looked breakable. Before he could reply, Ethan's voice called faintly from upstairs. Naomi hurried to him, but Alexander followed, slower, as though drawn despite himself. That night, the boy drifted to sleep with both their hands in his. Naomi hummed, her voice wrapping the room in warmth. Alexander sat silently, watching, not just his son, but her. For the first time, he didn't feel entirely alone in his own house. At this point, if you were Alexander, would you let your pride keep building walls, or allow Naomi's presence to break them down? Share your thoughts below. The mansion had grown quieter again, but the silence was different now, softer, not quite so hollow. Ethan's health seemed steadier. He still tired easily, but laughter returned in small bursts, his fragile voice asking for stories or songs instead of medicine. And yet, beneath the fragile peace, shadows lingered. One afternoon, Naomi carried a basket of fresh linens up the sweeping staircase. She passed by a door slightly ajar, the master bedroom, a place she'd always avoided out of respect. But today, her eyes caught on something inside, a photo frame tipped on the nightstand. She slowed, curiosity tugging at her. It was a picture of a woman, young, radiant, holding baby Ethan in her arms. Her smile was wide, her eyes filled with warmth. Naomi's chest tightened. She didn't need to ask. This was Ethan's mother. Before she could retreat, Alexander's voice cut through the room. "What are you doing?" She startled, nearly dropping the basket. He stood in the doorway, his eyes sharp, his face shadowed. I was just... She lowered her head quickly. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to intrude. His gaze flicked to the photo, then back to her. For a long moment, silence stretched. His voice, when it came, was quieter. That was Emily, my wife. Naomi hesitated. She was... beautiful. He stepped past her, lifting the frame with careful hands. His thumb brushed the glass, his jaw tightening. She died when Ethan was 3, cancer, quick, brutal. Naomi's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to tell her. His voice carried no boardroom authority now, just grief, raw and heavy. He set the frame back down, turning away. Since then, this house has been nothing but walls. Naomi's throat ached. She wanted to say something, but words felt too small. Instead, she whispered, I'm sorry. His eyes met hers, briefly, searchingly, before he dismissed the moment with a stiff nod. Get back to work. Later that evening, Naomi sat in her small room, her mind replaying the look in his eyes, the pain behind the steel. She had glimpsed the man beneath the billionaire, the widower, the father, the one carrying more than money could ever solve. She thought of her own past, her grandmother's little church, where hymns lifted cracked ceilings toward heaven, her mother's tired hands working double shifts to keep food on the table, and her own dream, once so bright, standing on a stage, microphone in hand, voice soaring. That dream had crumbled when her mother fell ill. Naomi had dropped out of school to work, scrubbing floors, cleaning houses. She sang only in kitchens now, to walls, and to children who weren't hers. Music for her wasn't just notes, it was survival. And maybe that's why Ethan clung to it, because she poured into those songs everything she had lost, everything she still hoped for. A few nights later, Naomi returned to Ethan's bedside. The boy, pale and tired, asked again, Sing, please. She hesitated. Alexander was in the room, sitting stiff in his chair. His eyes followed her like a hawk. But then Ethan's small hand curled around hers. Please, Naomi. She drew in a breath and began. Her voice filled the room, low and steady, rising like a tide. A song of hope, of light in darkness. Alexander stared, torn between anger and awe. He remembered Emily singing to Ethan as a baby, her voice soft against the night. He remembered standing in the doorway just as he had last week, feeling like love was a language he could never quite speak. Naomi's song cracked something in him. He closed his eyes, letting it pull him into memories he had long buried. When the last note faded, silence hung heavy. Ethan slept soundly, his face peaceful. Naomi rose to leave, but Alexander's voice stopped her. Why did you give it up? She turned, confused. Give what up, sir? Your voice, that gift. His eyes met hers, piercing but curious. It's not ordinary. You could have been something else. Her lips curved into a sad smile. Life doesn't always let you chase dreams. My mother got sick. I had to choose between music and taking care of her. And you chose her, Alexander said quietly. Naomi nodded. Family comes first. The words landed heavy in the room. Alexander looked at his son, asleep between them, and something in his chest twisted. For the first time, he wondered if maybe this woman, this maid, understood love in ways he never had. That night, after Naomi left, Alexander sat alone in the dim light. He looked at Emily's photo, then at Ethan's frail form. He thought of Naomi's voice, how it carried grief and love all at once. For years he had built walls of glass and stone, but in the cracks of those walls, Naomi's song had slipped through, reaching places even he couldn't shut off. And he was terrified of what that meant. If you had Naomi's gift but life forced you to give it up, would you still dare to use it, quietly, even when the world didn't value it? Share your answer in the comments. The days following Naomi's confession carried a different rhythm in the Grant mansion. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was waiting, listening. Ethan's condition had steadied, his color returning, his laughter surfacing more often, and between his room and the halls of polished marble, something delicate began to take root. It started one morning when Alexander entered the kitchen unexpectedly. Naomi, hair tied back, was humming while preparing Ethan's porridge. She didn't notice him at first. Her voice was light, playful, almost teasing. "You sing even while cooking," he said suddenly. Naomi startled, nearly dropping the spoon. I didn't realize anyone was here." Alexander leaned against the counter, watching her. His tie was loose, his usual armor of formality absent. "It suits you. The house doesn't feel so empty when you do." Her eyes widened. She had never expected praise from him. "Thank you, sir." He almost smiled. "Alexander," he corrected softly. Naomi blinked. "Sir, my name. You can use it when it's just us." She hesitated, her cheeks warming. "Alexander." The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. He gave a short nod and left before she could read more in his expression, but her heart beat faster the rest of the day. That evening, Ethan insisted both of them join him in the garden. Wrapped in a blanket, he sat in a chair while Naomi tended to the flowers, and Alexander hovered nearby, pretending he wasn't worried. "Naomi," Ethan piped up, "tell Daddy one of your stories." She smiled. "Stories?" "Yes," Ethan grinned weakly. "The funny ones you tell me when you clean my room." Alexander raised a brow. "Stories?" Naomi laughed softly, shaking her head. "They're not very sophisticated, I'm afraid. Just little tales my grandmother used to tell me, about stars or animals who could talk." "Tell one," Ethan urged. So she did. She told of a clever bird who outwitted a fox, her voice animated, her gestures lively. Ethan giggled, clutching his blanket. And though Alexander tried to maintain his usual detachment, a smile tugged at his lips before he could stop it. Naomi caught the glimpse of it, her chest warming. He looked years younger when he smiled, almost boyish. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Naomi lingered at his bedside. She began to sing softly, more confident now. Alexander sat in the chair opposite, silently listening. This time, he didn't hide it. He leaned back, eyes closed, letting the melody wash over him. When the song ended, his voice was rough. "You make it look so easy." Naomi tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "Loving him, calming him, giving him what he needs. I've tried, He trailed off, shaking his head. "I don't know how." Naomi's gaze softened. She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "You're trying more than you think. He sees you. He knows you're here. That matters." His eyes lifted to hers, raw and searching. "Emily was the gentle one. I only know how to build walls." Naomi hesitated, then said quietly, "Even walls can be rebuilt into bridges." The words hung between them, heavier than the silence. For a moment, Alexander let himself meet her eyes fully. There was no judgment there, only understanding. It unsettled him and comforted him in the same breath. Over the following days, their bond deepened in small, unexpected ways. Naomi teased him gently when he burned his toast, trying to make breakfast for Ethan. "You're a billionaire and you can't manage a toaster?" She laughed, shaking her head. Alexander smirked despite himself. "Delegation has always been my strength." They shared quiet conversations in the library when Ethan slept, about books Naomi loved as a child, about the places Alexander had traveled but never truly seen. One afternoon, when Naomi tripped while carrying laundry, Alexander caught her before she could fall. Their hands lingered a moment too long, eyes locking. Both pulled away quickly, but neither forgot the spark. The mansion began to change with them. Flowers Naomi arranged stayed fresh longer, as though the house itself breathed easier. Alexander spent more time away from his phone and more time sitting quietly near his son and near Naomi. And though neither dared to speak it, both felt the bond growing. One night, Ethan asked a question that froze them both. "Daddy," he whispered sleepily, "do you love Naomi?" Naomi's breath caught, her cheeks flushing. "Ethan," she murmured, "you should be sleeping." But the boy persisted. "I can tell. You smile more when she's here." Alexander's chest tightened. He glanced at Naomi, whose wide eyes darted away. He reached out to brush his son's hair back. "Rest now, son." But when the boy finally drifted off, the unspoken question lingered in the room like a ghost. In the quiet that followed, Alexander stood by the window, his silhouette cast in moonlight. Naomi remained at the bedside, her hands folded in her lap. Finally, he spoke. "He sees things I don't say." Naomi's heart pounded. Children notice more than we think. He turned toward her, eyes dark but soft. For a moment, the weight of class, race, position, all the boundaries between them seemed to blur, but just as quickly he looked away, retreating into silence. Still, Naomi knew something was changing, slowly, gently, undeniably. At this moment, would you root for Alexander and Naomi to cross the lines between them, or should they keep their bond only for Ethan's sake? Comment what your heart says. The warmth in the Grant mansion didn't last long. Whispers spread quickly in houses where wealth and power lived. Staff noticed the way Alexander lingered in the nursery more than usual, how Naomi's laughter echoed in halls once silent. It wasn't long before rumors brewed. One morning, as Alexander returned from a meeting, his sister-in-law, Claudia, was waiting in the parlor. Dressed immaculately, eyes sharp as glass, she wasted no time. "Alexander," she said coldly, "do you have any idea what people are saying?" He sighed, loosening his tie. "Claudia, not now." "Your maid," she snapped, voice dripping with disdain. "They say you let her sing lullabies, spend nights by Ethan's bed, play house as if she's Emily reborn. It's shameful. It's dangerous." His stomach twisted. "It's not like that." "Then end it," Claudia pressed. "Fire her, or I'll take this further. Ethan needs stability, not this spectacle." Naomi overheard pieces of the argument from the hallway, her heart sinking with every word. She hurried away, her chest tight. Later that evening, she tried to slip quietly into Ethan's room, but Alexander was already there, pacing. His face was stormy, his movements restless. "Naomi," he barked, sharper than he intended. She froze. "Yes, Mr. Grant." He looked at her, the woman whose voice had soothed his son, whose presence had softened his grief. But Claudia's words rang in his ears, shameful, dangerous, a spectacle. "You've overstepped," he said coldly. "Whatever this is, it ends now." Her breath caught. "Overstepped? I've only cared for Ethan. I've done what you wouldn't let yourself do." His eyes blazed. "Don't you dare." His voice was low, venomous. "Don't you dare imply you know what my son needs better than I do." Naomi's throat burned. "I didn't mean—" "You're just the help," Alexander spat. The words left his mouth before he could stop them, harsh and cruel. The silence that followed was unbearable. Naomi's face went pale, her lips parted, trembling, but no sound came. The wound was too deep. She turned sharply, leaving the room before the tears could fall. Ethan stirred, half awake, sensing the tension. "Naomi." "She's gone," Alexander muttered, his voice rough. "Sleep now." But the boy's eyes filled with tears. "I want her. Daddy, please, bring her back." Alexander reached out to hold him, but Ethan pushed his hand away. The rejection cut deeper than any boardroom betrayal. Naomi packed her things that night. Her hands shook as she folded her modest clothes into a worn bag. Every corner of the mansion whispered memories, Ethan's giggles, Alexander's rare smiles, the songs she'd poured into the walls. She whispered to herself, "I should have known better. People like me don't belong in worlds like this." As she closed the door behind her, she looked back one last time at the grand halls. They had never been hers, and now they never would be. The next days were agony. Ethan's laughter vanished, his appetite faded. He asked constantly, "Where's Naomi?" The staff avoided Alexander's gaze, moving like shadows. And Alexander himself, he was a man unraveling. He spent long nights in his study, glass after glass of scotch burning his throat, Naomi's face haunting his mind. Her words echoed, "I've only cared for Ethan. I've done what you wouldn't let yourself do." And the worst part, She was right. But pride was a cruel master. Every time he considered calling her back, Claudia's sneer returned to his mind. Shameful, dangerous. He clenched his fists, whispering into the dark, "You're the one who failed, not me." But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. One evening, Ethan's fever spiked suddenly. Alexander rushed to his bedside, panic surging. The boy's face was pale, his body trembling. "Daddy," Ethan whispered, "I want Naomi." Alexander's throat closed. He held his son, but the boy's sobs grew harsher. "Please, she makes the pain go away, please." Alexander pressed his lips to his son's damp forehead, his own heart breaking. "She's not here, Ethan. I'm here. I'm here." But Ethan turned his face away, tears slipping down his cheeks. Alexander had never felt so powerless. Not in business, not in life. He had fought enemies, controlled empires, but here, in this small room, he was utterly defeated. Naomi, meanwhile, sat in her tiny apartment across town, the hum of the city outside her window. She clutched a scarf Ethan had once given her, a silly gift, blue with cartoon stars. He'd said, "So you won't forget me when you leave my room." She wept quietly, the scarf pressed to her lips. For the first time in years, she felt foolish for dreaming. Foolish for believing her voice could matter in a house like Alexander Grant's. Foolish for letting herself care. In the mansion, Alexander stared at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, his face lined with exhaustion. He looked nothing like the man on magazine covers, the powerful CEO, untouchable and cold. Instead, he looked like a father who had lost more than he could bear. For the first time, he whispered aloud what he had refused to admit. "I need her." The confession startled even him, but the truth was undeniable. His son needed Naomi. And if he was honest, so did he. When Alexander lashed out, calling Naomi just the help, "Do you think she was right to leave, or should she have stayed for Ethan's sake? What would you have done?" The Grant mansion was quieter than it had ever been. The grand halls, once touched by Naomi's humming and Ethan's faint laughter, now swallowed every sound in cold silence. Alexander sat alone in his study, the city lights glittering through the glass walls like indifferent stars. Papers lay untouched on his desk. His phone buzzed with urgent calls from partners, but he ignored them. For the first time in his life, the empire he had built felt meaningless. He poured himself another drink, but even that failed to numb the ache. Naomi's words returned, sharp as knives. "I've only cared for Ethan. I've done what you wouldn't let yourself do." And Ethan's plea, "Please." "She makes the pain go away." Alexander slammed the glass onto the desk, shards splintering across wood. He bowed his head into his hands. "God," he whispered hoarsely, "what have I done?" Upstairs, Ethan lay restless. The fever had broken, but his spirit hadn't. He turned away from the nurses who tried to coax him to eat. His once bright eyes dulled with disappointment. He asked for Naomi less now, not because he had forgotten, but because he seemed to know she wasn't coming back. Alexander sat by his bedside one evening, watching his boy shrink into himself. "I'm here," he said softly, reaching for Ethan's hand. But Ethan turned away. "I don't want here. I want Naomi." The words cracked Alexander's heart wide open. For the first time, he wept openly in front of his son, his shoulders shaking. "I drove her away," he admitted, voice raw, "because I was afraid of what people would say, afraid of needing someone again. I was wrong, Ethan. I was so wrong." The boy's eyes welled with tears. "Then bring her back." Alexander's throat tightened. "I don't know if she'll come." "Try," Ethan whispered. "Please, Daddy. Try." That night, Alexander sat in the library, Emily's photo in his hands. He traced her smile with his thumb. "Emily," he murmured, voice breaking, "I don't know how to do this without you, but maybe she does. Naomi. She's not you, but she has given Ethan the hope I couldn't. She's given me something I thought I'd buried with you." The silence offered no answer, but the weight in his chest shifted. For the first time, Alexander felt clarity. If he wanted his son to live, not just survive, but live, he had to let go of his pride. He had to fight not for control, but for love. Across town, Naomi sat in her tiny apartment, staring at her packed bag in the corner. She had started applying for work elsewhere, offices, cleaning services, anything that would help her pay rent. But every time she tried to fill out an application, her hand stalled. Her mind drifted back to Ethan's smile when she sang, the way he leaned into her touch. She remembered Alexander's rare, unguarded expressions, the boyish smile, the vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke of Emily. Her heart ached. She told herself leaving was the right choice, it was safer. Pride protected her from disappointment. Yet deep down she longed to return, not for the mansion, not for Alexander, but for Ethan, and maybe, just maybe, for herself. The next morning, as dawn painted the city gold, Alexander made his decision. He drove himself, no chauffeur, no entourage. His car wound through the streets until it stopped outside a modest apartment building on the south side. He sat in the car for a long time, gripping the wheel. Billionaire CEOs didn't do this. Men like him didn't beg, but fathers did, and broken men who wanted healing did. Finally, he stepped out, his polished shoes incongruous against the cracked sidewalk. Naomi opened the door to a knock she didn't expect. When she saw him standing there, suit rumpled, eyes heavy, her breath caught. "Mr. Grant." "Alexander," he corrected softly. Her heart lurched at the sound of his voice. "Why are you here?" He swallowed hard, struggling to find words. For once, no prepared speech, no business pitch, no calculated control, just raw honesty. "I was wrong," he said hoarsely. "I was cruel. I let my pride speak instead of my heart. You were right. Ethan needs more than medicine. He needs love. He needs you." Naomi's eyes burned with tears. "And what about you? Do you need me, or just what I can do for him?" The question pierced him. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "I need you. Not just for him, for me, for this house, for everything I've forgotten how to feel." Naomi's lips trembled. "You hurt me." "I know," Alexander whispered, "and I will spend every day proving I'll never do it again, if you'll let me." The silence between them was thick with possibility. Naomi looked into his eyes, and for the first time saw no arrogance there, only a man stripped bare of pride, asking for grace. Her chest rose and fell, torn between fear and hope. Back at the mansion, Ethan sat by the window, staring at the driveway as if willing her to return. And for the first time in weeks, his small heart held a flicker of hope. If you were Naomi, standing in that doorway, would you forgive Alexander, or walk away to protect your heart? Comment your choice below. Naomi stood frozen in the doorway of her tiny apartment, Alexander's words echoing in her chest. His suit, once pristine, was wrinkled, his polished presence worn thin. But it was his eyes that held her, no longer cold steel but raw, vulnerable, searching. For a long moment, she said nothing. Finally, she whispered, "Do you even know what you're asking?" Alexander nodded slowly. "I'm asking for another chance, not as your employer, but as a man who failed and wants to do better, for my son, for myself, for us." Naomi's throat tightened. The walls she had built trembled under the weight of his sincerity. She searched his face for arrogance, for insincerity, but all she found was truth. Still, her voice shook. "If I come back, it can't be like before. No walls, no cruelty. Respect, Alexander. Do you understand?" He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I understand. And I promise." For the first time, Naomi let her heart believe him. When Naomi returned to the Grant mansion later that day, Ethan's reaction was instant. The moment he saw her, his eyes widened, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Naomi!" he cried, throwing his arms weakly around her neck. She held him close, her own tears falling into his hair. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not leaving again." Alexander stood in the doorway, watching the reunion with a lump in his throat. For once, he didn't try to control the moment. He simply let it happen. Ethan pulled back, looking between them. "Daddy, you brought her back?" Alexander knelt beside his son, his hand resting gently on his small shoulder. "Yes, because I finally listened, not just to you, but to my own heart." Ethan smiled, small but bright. The days that followed were different from anything the mansion had known before. Naomi sang openly now, her voice filling the halls without fear. Staff paused in their duties to listen, their hardened faces softening at the sound. Alexander, once a shadow passing through corridors, became present. He sat at the dinner table instead of eating alone in his study. He played chess with Ethan, read him stories, even laughed at Naomi's playful teasing. One evening, Naomi caught him helping Ethan stack blocks on the floor, his expensive suit rumpled, his tie tossed aside. She smiled quietly to herself. The billionaire was learning to be a father, but the true transformation came not just from fatherhood, but from love. One night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Alexander lingered by the window while Naomi tucked the boy's blanket tighter. "You've changed this house," Alexander said softly. Naomi turned, startled. "I only did what anyone with love in their heart would do." He shook his head. "No, not anyone. You, only you." Her breath caught. The air between them felt charged, fragile. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Naomi, I don't just need you here for Ethan. I need you here for me. I've lived in shadows since Emily died, and you've shown me light I didn't think I deserved again." Naomi's lips parted, tears brimming. "Alexander, I know I hurt you," he continued quickly, "and I know it will take time to earn your trust. But I want to, not as your employer, as the man who loves you." The words hung in the air, raw and unpolished, but true. Naomi pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, her heart swelling. She had told herself not to dream, not to believe. But here it was. Slowly, she stepped closer, her voice breaking. "You've already begun earning it." Their hands found each other, tentative but sure. And in that moment, the mansion no longer felt like marble and glass. It felt like home. Weeks later, Ethan's health improved. The doctors marveled at his progress, calling it resilience, recovery. But those in the house knew the truth. It wasn't just medicine. It was love. Naomi's songs, Alexander's presence, Ethan's laughter. Together, they had turned the tide. One evening they sat in the garden, stars blinking overhead. Ethan nestled between them, his head on Naomi's lap, his hand clasped in Alexander's. "Daddy?" Ethan asked sleepily. "Yes, son? Do you love Naomi now?" Alexander smiled gently, glancing at Naomi. "Yes, very much." Naomi's cheeks warmed, but she didn't look away. Ethan grinned, drifting towards sleep. "Good, then we can all be happy." As the boy's breathing deepened, Alexander leaned closer, his lips brushing Naomi's ear. "Do you believe in second chances?" he whispered. Naomi turned, her smile tender. "I do, because you've given me mine." And in that quiet garden, beneath the stars, they sealed the promise, not just of love, but of a future rebuilt from pain into something beautiful. The mansion that had once been silent now breathed with life. Music floated through its halls, laughter echoed against its walls, and for the first time in years, Alexander Grant understood what it meant to be rich, not in money, but in love. Do you believe true love can survive being tested by pride, grief, and fear? Share your thoughts and your own stories of unexpected love in the comments below.